Hello and welcome to our video cast. Today we are going to be talking about how to create research clinician relationships to help with fostering more translational based research. So my name is Matt Rivera. I am in the Doctorate in Athletic Training program at ISU, and I have a couple of my colleagues here, Lacey, Chrissy, and Brian. So how do you guys think at your own clinical site we can help bridge this gap between this traditional bench research and practice-based research to help create more of that translational continuum that we've talked about in the past?
I think there's a gap right now, like what I'm seeing in my clinical site. And I also wrote about it in one of our assignments this week. But I think there's a fundamental gap between researchers and clinicians right now, because I feel like the people in my setting that are clinicians, they read EBP, like articles and whatnot, but they don't really participate in it. And I don't even know if they even apply it. And then I feel like at the same time, those who do research are quick to find all these things that helps in clinical practice, but there's apparently this 10 to 17 year gap, right? So I think the first thing I'm noticing is that there's a fundamental gap between researchers and clinicians. So I think as a DAT student, we're both, right? We're practitioner researchers. And so I think like encouraging EBP, encouraging people to even participate in like informal research is a way that we can kind of bridge that gap, if that makes sense.
So when you say informal research, what are you talking about? Like, can you describe to you what that means and what that kind of looks like at your site?
Yeah, I think, I grew up. I started my practice in like a setting where it was like, you just did it because everyone did it, right? Like that's how you learned. That's how the other person learned. That's how the person before you learned. Everyone learned the same way. We're still doing it. It's no longer proven effective, but nobody is practicing anything different. So like informal research to me is what I do on a daily basis, right? I look at this and I know that it's supported in literature, but it's just not working in my clinical practice, or vice versa. I'm a big believer in ultrasound, and I'm kind of on the fence about laser because I'm still getting used to it. But like there's a lot of like research out there that's really contradicting to its benefits, right? And so people in my clinic like don't do it because they just have never learned it, or they see one paper and they're like, this is a waste of time. But like doing that informal research by taking your patients and trying different things and not just sticking with the same thing and hoping it'll work the 15th time isn't going to get us anywhere. So in my idea, that's informal research.
I get that. I think that's something I've recently ran into, specifically as we're doing like our diagnostic algorithms. So I work in an ortho clinic, and we've got an orthopedic doctor he's a shoulder guy, if you must. And I was talking about some of the like testing, some of the research articles about clustering of tests and things like that. And he's like, yeah, I cluster tests. And one of them that kept coming up over and over again was this active release test for shoulder instability, and they also call it the surprise test, where you do the relocation test, but then you take the hand off to see if it creates anterior pain. Just because research says that cluster of tests is good, Dr. Eber and I even discussed that like if they put that into clinical practice, that can actually create distrust in your patients. So even though research says like this test will tell you if there's anterior instability, it's not as feasible in clinical practice. So I think that kind of seeing that gap, and I kind of feel like I am the middleman right now, right? So I was discussing this with our shoulder guy, and he's saying, these are the things I do. These are the things that are proven to work in my clinical practice. And then I go in and I open these people up and I check them out and find out if I'm correct or not. And then I'm reading these research papers and discussing them with him. And he's like, I can't do that test with my patients. Like if I'm inflicting them pain just to see if there's instability, then it's not worth doing that. And so like I said, I definitely see that. And I see the need for having that person there to say like, to report that back. Like, hey, that cluster test is great, but that test isn't going to be feasible in a clinical setting. So having someone there to bridge that gap and be that liaison, which hopefully can then you report that back to the researchers or do new research that says that test doesn't work. What can we substitute that will still lead us to a good cluster of tests that's more feasible for clinical practice. I think that's the goal. I think that's what we're supposed to do. I don't know how to make that happen, but
Lacey, I agree with you. I think the biggest issue or gap that we are seeing that we continuously talk about is the patients, our interaction with the patients. Researchers really don't have that interaction. They don't usually have a long-term interaction. That's something that's missing, as well as logistics of doing this within a, Matt and I are in a high school setting, right? Can I really do this long-term intervention, right, on this patient that I have, that might take half an hour, but I have half an hour to get 32 athletes out to practice. So that's, I think, where we come in the balance. And another just example that I could think of in my head was kinesiotape, right? It's essentially just a placebo effect. And while it's not going to be the only thing I do, if the kinesiotape helps my athlete think that they're getting better and they feel better, why not use it? Even
as long as it doesn't have a negative effect. I understand that.
Yeah.
Matt, what about you? Sorry, Chrissy.
Oh, Matt, do you
Go
want to
ahead,
go?
Chrissy. Chrissy, you're on this train of thought.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, it always reminds me and brings me back to that manual article we read. And I still can't remember what it was. It was some joint mob or something. And it's sad that I can't remember it. But it was so frustrating to me because I read it and it was like statistically significant to work, but it wasn't clinically applicable. And it drove me crazy because they're like, oh, you should do this because there's statistically significant results, but the MDC is is something astronomical you can't read, or it was something that was completely invalid. And so that is the gap that we're seeing, right? That's exactly what you guys are talking about, is that yes, research is saying one thing, but I can just imagine a researcher sitting at his desk going, haha, it's statistically significant, and then the clinician's going, and there's nothing in the middle.
Right.
So I think one of the articles that we were supposed to read this week talked about the DNP versus the PhD in nursing. I think did a really good job of describing kind of the motives behind why both parties are doing research, and how PhDs are doing their research because it's part of their research line. They're looking for tenure for their portfolio, and it's what they've done, and it's what they were trained in, and it's what they are doing for their job. And it's no better or no worse than what DNPs are doing, because they are doing more research that is clinically based with their patients, because that is their job. And I think it just comes down to your job. But I do think that at the end of the day, we got to realize that our job is to help patients, whether you are a PhD, terminal degree researcher, or you are a clinician. End of the day, we are trying to help each other provide the best patient care possible for whatever patient population you're in, whether it's the high school, whether it's D1 at ISU, or in a clinic with Don Joy. Mm-hmm. Patient care is basically the reason why we got into this, and the sole purpose of our profession. And I think if we bring everything back to that, I think Dr. Games does a great job with this. And I think with our proposals last year, it was about a year ago almost, he did a great job of forcing us to realize the impact that our projects are going to have, not on us, not on the research community, but on patients. And I think by doing that and by describing that connection to other researchers and to other clinicians, that will be one of the ways that we can bridge the gap. Is, okay, so you're doing this project on ankle instability, right? You guys are doing a project on ankle instability, and I can't really knock your project because all of your guys' measures are pretty clinical-based outcome measures. But some of the studies, some of the laser studies, I mean, I get the connection between mitochondrial output and recovery and regeneration, but to a clinician, if you're talking about this really in-depth physiological based outcomes that you're measuring versus the articles that just talk about muscle recovery, fatigue, and things like that, the clinician is going to be more apt to draw to those. But both tie into patient care and getting the patient better. So I think making the connection from what the research purpose is to clinical care and patient care will help bridge this gap a little bit better. Now, how do you get the buy-in from both parties? that's going to be the tougher question.
Well, I think, Matt, is one of the ways that we can go about that is finding someone, a PhD, who has a research interest in an area where you need help. So, like you were using the photobiomodulation aspect, using the laser, right? We know Dr. Demchek has a really big interest in that and has done some research on that. So if I, in my clinic, need to use, or I'm curious about laser, maybe talking to him and seeing if he knows about any articles or research that's already been done on the question that I have, and then taking that, or maybe seeing if he can do one and working collaboratively to do that. And if there are articles, maybe like you said, that look at the biological markers, maybe the creatine kinase or the mitochondrial activity, but then I think it becomes our role as the DAT students or at that point, doctors in athletic training, to go ahead and perform the research clinically and to use those clinical measures. And that's how we build that transition.
I think it's an excellent point. I really like Matt and your responses. Matt, I'm sorry, but you got super passionate and I loved it. And you're right, common goal, right? What's the basis of any kind of relationship and any of your friends is that you have something in common, right? Whether that's where you see each other or you laugh at the same jokes or whatever it is, right? Same thing here. And I think you guys make a great point, and that's kind of opened up my mind because I didn't even think about that. I had no idea how to bridge the gap. And then I was like, obviously, we have the same goal, right? Increase patient care. We may not have the same outcomes, that contradicts myself. I meant we don't have the same end. Our end goal
not the same starting point necessarily, right?
Thank you. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Our short-term goal is not the same, but our long-term goal is. So that's what it comes down to. And I really appreciate y'all speaking up about that because it was really good.
I think that in terms of how do you make it happen, I do think that article about the DNPs and how they're in such a unique position really does relate really well to the DAT because we are in a unique position, right? So we're getting to know and learning more about bench researchers, right? I mean, we read these articles. Had I never been in the DAT, I would have never thought to just use that contact information from someone in a research article and just reach out to them, which I did that for my research proposal last semester. Dr. Gibbs was like, why don't you just reach out to this person? And I was like, I'm going to reach out to an article writer? And then I did, and it went well, right? I mean, we have a unique ability because we are learning more about research to understand the higher level articles that are deep into research because we've been trained in that. And then take that information and make it more even with our evidence-based manuscript articles, right? So we took a bunch of information from a bunch of fancy articles and turned it into something that was clinically applicable and also readable for the practicing clinician who maybe isn't going to want to read about mitochondrial activity. I can guarantee as a secondary school athletic trainer 5 years ago, if someone was like, oh, you need to read this article about photobiomodulation and mitochondrial activity, it's going to change your whole practice, I would have read the whole article and not taken anything from it because I wasn't trained how to read that and understand it or how to apply it. And so a large part of this program is that. So it's a matter of developing, just like a practice-based research network, like a translational research network where we're using that information. I really like the idea of the liaison. I loved their Venn diagram that they had of this is the type of research that these people do, and this is the type of research that these people do. This is what they can do together. I think.
And what was in the middle?
What?
What was in the middle? Patient care.
I believe it was patient care. I was going to say I looked at it the other day, and I've looked at a lot of other articles for our diagnostic algorithm, so I don't remember exactly. But patient care was in the middle.
It says effective studies, but it's patient care.
Patient care. But yeah, effectiveness. And I think it's interesting because we can do practice-based research, right? We can do something that's going to happen and affect our own population. But we can also then build on an idea that can, that they can help us work with and basically be bringing things backward and forward, right? So if I have a network of bench researchers that I can reach out to and be like, hey, we've tried this. How can we make this into something? How can we learn more about it on your end so that we can use it and then make sure it's effective on the other end? I think that you kind of has to be a give and take, right? We come up with ideas, we see these new things. And and move it back there. And like I said, we are set up very uniquely for that with our just training and education in the different types of research, and that we do really have the ability to take something really difficult and break it down and apply it kind of through our education. So I think that it has to be about collaborative, like we need a consortium, like, or whatever those are, like the translational research, whatever, so that we can have those people that are interested in, I mean, who doesn't want to see the work that they do go into actual practice? And so I think that you need to create those bench researchers and those people that are the clinicians who are willing to try things out for them, and somebody in between to help pass the information along and kind of filter it back and forth. I know that, like, even now I don't feel like I'm smart enough to be like communicating with like a bench researcher, be like, so I think we should try this. Like, no, but I'm just saying we have that, we are there.
So
Go ahead, Matt.
Two things. First off, I think Lacey brings up a good point with our education and our training as a DAT, because I think we get enough of the traditional research and we now understand how to read it, but not only how to read it and digest it, but how to apply it.
Right.
And I think that going a step further, because people that in the assignment, this part 2 of this assignment, where you're supposed to differentiate between the different degrees and their kind of research outputs and what experience they have with research. I think that, even like post-professional masters, when they're doing their thesis, it's important they understand the research process, they understand data collection. But I think one thing that we get that a lot of other programs don't, and that a lot of other degrees don't, is the quality improvement. And if you think about quality improvement and data collection and research, it's pretty similar. You're taking a problem that you think you have, you're applying some sort of system intervention to it, you're assessing your outcomes, how can we do better? And I think that is one way that we can not only apply quality improvement into our patient care, but also research more so into patient care for us DATs versus somebody that just came out with a professional education.
Right.
2, Brian, going back to your point about reaching out to PhDs, I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit here. What if I wasn't in the DAT program and I was just an athletic trainer at Marshall High School in Marshall, Illinois with 4,000 people, and I had no connections to research institutions? Yeah, sure, I might be more motivated to go out and reach out, but how do we get buy-in from those small town ATs to start doing this?
I think that comes down to being involved in like anything like NATA or LADA or whatever your local things are. Because you can find, like if I didn't know what to do, I'd go to NATA and find the Research Foundation or find whatever, and then find someone that I was like, hey, I'm having a problem with this. Or, I don't know if that's the perfect answer, but I think that that's a start. I'm kind of a go-getter. So if I have a problem, I'm going to be like, where do I find this? Google, who can help me? But even just if you read an article that you think is interesting, reaching out. Brian, what do you think?
Well, I don't think we can control what other clinicians do. So Matt, if you're, small rural high school, right? If I don't know you have a problem, I can't do anything to help you out, right? So I can't take responsibility for that, but I think that you definitely have the means on your own to go out and find and reach out to that person or find research articles. With that being said, I think that there's no reason that you can't be educated on it. Where that education comes from, I'm not quite sure. But like Lacey was saying earlier, how she reached out to her own expert or PhD in the field through the research article, I imagine she got the contact information. I don't think there's any reason that anyone couldn't do that as long as that information was available.
And it has to be available, right? Because we all need EBP CEUs to be an athletic.
That's why I think that's why they need to create these networks like the PBR network for other research.
Definitely.
I think
perfect.
The other thing that struck me was the translational, like T0 through T5. I think that we're also in a unique place, or it's a unique opportunity for us to help follow things along the line, right? I think that there's a lot of research that never makes it to like the public health setting or even the global setting, right? My translational thing was about concussion education, like related to mental health, where sometimes you have depression after concussion and you may not understand that it could be related to a concussion, right? I mean, you might have symptoms of that, and it might be from something completely different, but how much of that gets beyond the healthcare field, right? We know about it here, but why don't our athletes know about that or things about that? Or why doesn't it get bridged beyond that? And I think that that's kind of where we come in the translational process, right? Is that we help take it, or we can help take it farther down the line and get that information beyond just healthcare providers, but maybe on those more global levels. But if we're not there to help it, I don't know who else does it. Clearly no one, because we're at this like 17-year research, 17-year gap. But I really just thought of that as like, we can help to move it along the way, making it, palatable for the next person when we're not talking about creatine kinase and stuff like that, because that's intimidating. It's going to be intimidating if I call my mom and start talking about mitochondrial activity and creatine kinase. It's going to be lost on her, regardless of how beneficial it could be for her to have something done to affect those things. I think it comes down to like creating that, but any ideas on how you do that? Like how do we create that? Where do we start?
I guess in just, I don't know, just comes down to communication and relationships, but I don't even know how, that's the whole question, right? How does it start? I had a really good answer, and then now I'm second guessing it. So I'm just going to mute my mic now.
Oh, no. Use it.
I mean, I just think, how do we bridge the gap? How do we make it available to those people? I mean, we are advocates. I don't know, spread our little wings and go.
All right, so sorry, Chrissy.
No, you see?
I'm going to tie back what Lacey said to also what Brian said.
Ooh,
Brian,
magic.
we cannot control what other clinicians do. But to answer Lacey's point, I think that this program and the reason why we're here is a great starting point to start leading from the middle. And I can't control what other clinicians in my conference do. But through relationships, through interactions with them, I can lead from the middle and try to advance the profession forward by influencing them. Yeah, a lot of times, like Chrissy, if you go in tomorrow and you're like, hey, Will, Brian, and Shelly, I think we need to start doing more practice-based research. What do you think is going to happen? It's not going to be.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Will do.
Yeah.
It's not going to be. It's not going to be an overnight thing, but. Like if you look at the articles from the DNPs, like it took about 12 years, but they got it going. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we just graduated our first class, but it's going to take some serious effort from us leading from the middle to make this happen.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing is like, you have to lead by example. Think about how, I guess some of you are in places where people are in the DAT that you work with, but I think about when I was doing my clinical experiences last semester in the athletic training room, how the things that I implement from my education from the DAT changed the way that the other people practice. So patient-centered care became something that was more, they're not just in there doing clinician-centered care, like, whatever, we're going to do what we always do. I mean, it really became more about taking care of the patient. They started doing some more quality improvement things. And I think if we make it more accessible to the clinician, right? So I do feel like there's that stigma, I guess, where research is for researchers. When I first came into this program, I honestly said, I'm not a researcher. I don't know how to do research. Like, that's not for me. I don't know about it. But I have been researching all along, right? Anytime you try out a new technique or things like that, or kind of change your mode of practice because you read something, you're a researcher, you're a practice-based researcher, even if it's more informal. So I think that, you're right, leading from the middle is huge, and then finding a way to help get it beyond just what you said, beyond my initial relationship. So can I put out like a NATA editorial or something like that, an opinion piece that goes to the masses? And even if I only affect change in 5 clinics, that's 5 clinics that I've affected change in, rather than no clinics that ever get or understand principles that can really affect quality of patient care. And I think that sometimes it's hard to find the quality of patient-centered care in some of the bench articles, but it's really there, right? It's helping them find where that is. And I think that's where we come in.
Lacey, I think we're running low on time, but there is a point that you said about, if you reach out to 5 and like influence 5 other settings, right? 5 other clinics, so to speak, then how many do each of them reach out to? And then that's kind of how I see this growing and really exponentially getting bigger. So I really think you were onto something with that.
Yeah, I think we just have to build the networks. That's going to be key. So reach out to people, and I mean, it's going to be hard to find buy-in to some of them. I mean, when you're applying for jobs, a lot of them say PhD only, right? If you're looking for a professor type position or something like that, some will say PhD only. And so it's also important to like sort of educate people about what you can do, and then create that network so you can actually have that give and take. Because I think there's people that don't understand even what a DNP does. I had someone tell me the other day, well, they just do administrative stuff. They don't really do any clinical practice. And I was like,
I had no idea what it was.
That's a limited experience.
To be honest, I didn't know there was such a thing as DNP until we read.
Somebody mentioned it to me. One of my friends from high school, like, she's like, oh, I told her I was in the DA team. She's like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I'm looking to get my DNP. And I was like, what does that mean?
I think it's similar to us. I mean, it's different, but I mean, think about how other people respond to the DAT, right? They don't really know what we do. I think we're still trying to figure out what it's going to be in the long run, but I hope it is that person who can be that like liaison between, we can be the evidence-based medicine liaison rather than I just took a course on NATA Quiz Center because I had to, because I needed it. You be that person, and we can, like I said, we can not only do our own research, but help make other research more appealing to people who actually can apply it. Let's narrow down 17 years. That would be great if something got to my clinic before 17 years. Any other specific points we want to discuss?
I mean, I think everyone had really great input. We hit it right on the head. So I hope the rest of our groups really had I hope everybody had good conversations like we did, because it's going to take all 16 of us, 18 of us. I don't even know how many there are to at least start a change. I know it could start with one person, but 18 doesn't hurt.
Yeah, that's right. Very true. Any closing thoughts from the gentleman?
No, I guess not. Matt, do you have anything?
I just think that it's going to take a lot of leading from the middle and just really challenging people to think about why they're doing what they're doing. Chrissy kind of opened this up with, I do it because that's the way I've always done it. I'm doing research because it's on my agenda and I'm trying to get tenure. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, do your job, got to get tenure, got to get paid. I get it. I'm not doing research because it doesn't matter to my clinic. I've been working in my clinic for 12 years and nothing's gone wrong. Has anything gone right? Can you do better? I think just challenging people to think about why they're doing what they're doing and if they can engage in this and improve their outcomes or help with patient care in general.
Matt, you've inspired me.
So inspiring.
I think that's a great place to cut the video short.
Seriously considering changing my TED Talk topic now.
All right.
I would listen.